Please give it up for the hilarious Ethan Hershenfeld!
The moment of just the magic of getting an idea that then you realize, oh my God, this is going to be funny. That's an exciting thing.
If you've been listening to this podcast since the beginning, you may remember that that's how we began the very first episode of the Experience Podcast. I'm Elizabeth Pearson Garr. As we gear up for the launch of Season 3 in 2 weeks, we're looking back at some highlights of our first 2 seasons. In this episode, a compilation of guests who were very entertaining. Get it? All of these people have had experiences in the entertainment industry. We'll start with the delightful, down-to-earth Amanda Doctor, who told us what it's like to attend the Academy Awards in Season 1, Episode 3. She was a great person to talk to about this, since she's been 8 times. Her husband, Pete Docter, is the head of Pixar and has won 3 Oscars for Up, Inside Out, and Soul.
People will say, oh, what did you wear? And I'm like, well, the way I usually work to find out what I'm going to wear is I go on Nordstrom.com, order a whole bunch of dresses, have them sent to my house, and in the privacy of my own room, I shall try them on, and, then you can return what you don't want. And I did that again this year, and while I was trying stuff on, this one needed to be taken in here, and this one was too long and too big. You also don't want to wear a dress with a train, because there's a lot of people, and people step on dresses, just as you're like going through, and you see women getting mad, and you're like, you're wearing a lot of volume here. What do you expect? So
you want to wear something that's up for trouble.
Exactly. And people are getting mad, and no one to blame but yourself. But I was trying on dresses, and I was over in my closet, and I saw something. I'm like, what is this dress from? Where did I wear this old one hanging up here? And I thought, if I don't remember where I wore that dress, nobody else is going to remember where I wore that dress. So I returned everything that I had ordered, and I wore a dress that I had worn before. And nobody noticed.
As long as we're talking about that stuff, can you kind of take me through that process? So you fly down to LA, you're staying in a hotel,
This is where the Disney machine is big and wonderful and generous. We'll fly down, say, Wednesday or Thursday, and the Academy has a lot of events planned for all the nominees. There'll be talks, and there'll be dinners, and there'll be stuff like that. So you can actually get to talk with your fellow nominees. And sometimes we're invited to you've seen them in, they're called gifting suites, where you walk through these hotel rooms or big spaces and people give you things. It's crazy. Everything
like
from
watches,
socks to sunglasses to jewelry to t-shirts and they all just want famous people to wear them and promote their thing. And somehow we get invited too. We've only been invited to a few of them, and you can see they're a little disappointed when they figure out who we are. They want the stars. They want the people in People magazine, but they're fun. And we'll have dinners with friends and colleagues and that kind of stuff. And then the Sunday morning, we have a tradition of having breakfast with some dear friends, including Richard Sherman, who he and his brother wrote the music for Mary Poppins, and it's Disneyland stuff, and we've known Richard and Elizabeth for years, and so we call them our good luck charm for Sunday morning brunch. Wonderful people. And then at some point, the Disney people have hired, bless their hearts, a makeup and hair person to come take care of both Pete and me, and they'll spend an hour and a half on me and 4 minutes on Pete.
So they come to the hotel, and they
come to the hotel, and they have a whole bag of stuff.
Glam squad?
Exactly. I always just say, I don't want to be embarrassing. That's my, I don't need to stand out. I just don't want to, I don't want to stand out for good or bad. I just want to blend right in. And for Pete, they'll, pluck a few eyebrows or take a shine off his chin or whatever. And he's good to go. And then one of the things of being an animated feature nominee is we know the press don't really care as much as about the celebrities. So they always try to get us to go early so that the red carpet isn't packed. And so we'll walk through when it's pretty light on the crowds. Some will ask Pete questions, and there's usually somebody who walking in front of Pete who will hold up a sign kind of announcing who this guy is I'm with. And some of the press are like, oh yeah, I have a question. And other press are like, no, we don't have any questions for him. We don't want to talk to him.
We'll pass.
And Pete's like, good, one less. He wants to get out.
Yeah.
So we make our way through he makes his way along the red carpet as a guest. Actually, as you enter the space, you go through security and they check, make sure your tickets and your ID. And then there's actually kind of 3 lanes of walking in this long distance. And closest to the press, they put all the nominees. On the opposite side, they put everybody else. And you're just supposed to just keep walking. And those people usually, if you watch the show, usually walk kind of slowly because they want to be seen on TV. And if you kind of pull yourself off the side, you can linger a little bit longer. And there's a middle lane, as far as somebody called it the carpool lane, and it was for security or like people in wheelchairs who need to like get through. But so you're walking along this long walkway, and sometimes it's an hour of press if they all want to talk to you. And for Pete, it's not. And I'm over on the other side just kind of waiting for him as I'm kind of staggering along with him.
Trying to track him as you go down.
And then once that's done, he's free to go in, and you can grab a cocktail and that kind of thing before you get seated in your seats. And then if the show starts at 5, at 4:40 is when all the celebrities actually show up. Out on the red carpet, it's just crazy. But we're long in and away from all those guys because they don't want us around.
So you said you have your tickets. Are there actual tickets? Like getting into a football game or something?
They send seats. Yep. With
seats. Your seat numbers.
Yes, very much. And the Dolby Theater, where it normally is a huge theater. And the first kind of section, the first 12 rows, is where most of the nominees and celebrities sit. And everybody else in the back and up in the thing, they're studio executives and Academy members can put their name in the lottery to buy tickets just to attend the event.
In the very first episode of this podcast, Season 1, Episode 1, I spoke with the very funny Ethan Hirschenfeld about what it's like to be a stand-up comedian. In this part of the conversation, we were talking about how he crafts and refines his routines. What if you get a kind of a lousy response from an audience? You think, this is a pretty good bit, I think, and they're just kind of give it a dud response. Do you give that a lot of credence? Or you just say, I'm going to give this a couple other nights or something? Because what if they're just sort of a bad crew? Maybe they just flew in from Texas or something and they're tired, or you're crowdsourcing, but maybe they're just a bad crowd.
Well, okay, yes, you're crowdsourcing, but they're not a bad crowd. And this is a principle I think that is really critical. There are no bad audiences. There might be some, but for the most part, that's kind of a lazy excuse by a comedian to say they're not getting it, or the audience, they're telling the truth. They're not there to do anything but laugh. So if they're not laughing, it's because you're not making them laugh. So it's your job when you're up there to make them laugh. So they're likely not a bad audience. You're likely either not telling a great joke or not bringing your best energy or whatever it is. So your job is to make them laugh.
So face the hard truth. They're not laughing.
But you definitely don't want to give up on a joke that you think is good and promising based on 1 or 2 or 3, maybe 3. You could start to give up on it. But you do want a large data set to make your make your decisions.
You could change the word. You could change the pacing. You could change the intonation of...
Yeah. And again, another thing to change is attitude, which is kind of like the subtext. So without changing the words one bit, you can alter the joke and turn it into a terrific joke by changing your attitude. If your attitude is maybe upbeat and that's not working, what if you told that joke as a tragedy? That might get the big laugh. And a lot of times that kind of adjustment is what's needed. Especially you'll see that with a lot of comedians starting out are having fun. They should be having fun. They should continue to have fun. But frequently in comedy, you're not looking at the comedian telling stories about what a great time they had. Like a lot of times the material is about how awful everything is, or this thing was, or that thing was, or that person was. What I was going to say about a relative beginner at comedy, you might see their smirk. The smirk of their enjoyment might be coming through too much. So they're telling their joke, and their smirk is killing the joke, or their laugh is killing the joke. That's an example of an attitude that might be undercutting what's a really good joke. Because the audience isn't going to have the fun of seeing this character, this person on stage, go through the trials and miseries of whatever the situation they're describing is. They're not going to be on board for that journey if the comedian's smirking and looking like they're having a great time. So that would be something where technically you'd point out to the person that, it's a good joke, you're hurting it by having too much fun.
Yeah, so that's where the acting comes in.
Yeah, it is acting. Yeah. There's the text on the page, and then there's all the stuff that you got to endow it with, everything that the audience is seeing.
Ethan joined me a second time in Season 1, Episode 9, to talk about his experiences as a professional opera singer and actor. Too bad the guy is so short of talent. Since our interview first aired, Ethan has appeared in the movie Red Notice on Netflix. We were talking about the audition process actors go through, and Ethan was multitasking, entertaining his dog with a ball in the background.
So you upload your take or few takes of the scene, along with the slate, where you say your name and your height and where you are and that whole thing. And you submit it and you hope. But the brutal thing about this business is you don't get people are sometimes surprised about this, but you don't get a thank you or a that was nice, but we're going this way. You either get the job or you get silence. There's one intermediate thing, which is you could get what they call getting pinned for the role or put on hold, where the casting people and the producer have decided it's down to you and one other person or two other people. So then they'll ask you to put those dates on hold while they're deciding. But mostly, 90% of the time, it's either silence or the job. So that's something that takes some getting used to. As far as preparing the scenes, I just try to keep it simple. Just read it a bunch, memorize it, if it's not too long a scene and if time isn't too short, and then do a few takes. And what you want to do, the challenging thing in this world of self-taping is that there's no one there. Usually, the nice thing with a casting director is when you do a scene, when you go into a room and you do the scene, frequently the casting director will then say, okay, let's adjust it in this particular way.
Like, give me a little more...
Yeah, or frequently, as I mentioned in my comedy act, frequently it's give me less. Do less is something you hear because TV or film, the camera's right up on your face, and so you don't have to do a hell of a lot. Or they'll point out something about the scene you hadn't thought of, like to give it some other attitude, like we were talking about before, or more aggressive or less, whatever it is. You get an actual, and that's actually the fun part of it, to be honest. That's the truth of the matter. The job of being an actor at the level I'm at with it, which is, I get some gigs, a lot of gigs I don't get, is that you're auditioning. That's the job. The job is the auditioning. And the lion's share of the acting that I do is the auditioning, if you really break it down. I'll have 10, maybe 20 days on a set in a year, but I'll do 50, 60, 70, 80, however many auditions I do. I have a lot of days that I'm doing auditions. So the fun of being in the room with the casting directors, that can be the creative fun thing, where they're giving you the feedback and they're giving you some adjustments, and then you got to try to put the adjustments right into action.
I got to learn about another kind of acting, voice acting, from John Malone in Season 1, Episode 7. John had an interesting route to becoming a voiceover artist.
I had several careers before voiceover. One of the things that was attractive about voiceover at that time was how the internet had really changed the face of that whole industry. Now that there was instant digital communication, there was less need for people to drive to a studio. And you could get auditions at websites. They had these things called pay-to-play websites where you could pay a membership fee, and now there are, it's like classified ads, voice auditions for you. So that's kind of how I cut my teeth on it and how I got started. I just got myself a microphone and tried to make a space where I could record and have the recording sound decent, and then just started submitting auditions that way.
I love when people have that moment where they kind of get the courage up to change from, oh, I wish I could do that, or how do those people do that?
Right.
And switch that feeling to, why not me? I can do that.
Yeah.
That person can be me. And then they take the leap. You took the leap and made it become you.
It's probably not fair to say that I left one job to leap into another, because the truth is, when I left that other job, I didn't know exactly what I was going to do. Voiceover was something I was exploring, but I can't say I had 100% confidence that that was going to be my next thing or that was going to be my career. I just knew that I couldn't do what I was doing anymore, and I needed to make a change. It wasn't like I leapt from one thing into another with all kinds of confidence that this new thing was going to happen. But it is definitely true that I looked at it with fresh eyes and suddenly thought, this seems like something I could accomplish. If I really set my mind to it, it seems doable.
Had you been told many times in your life, you have such a cool voice, you should try this? Or did it more emanate from your acting background that you thought, I could do something with my voice?
It's both. But yes, I'd heard from lots of people over time, you have a really good voice. You should try voiceover. And it is a huge cliche in the voiceover industry because a lot of people get into it because of that, because people told them they have a great voice or a unique voice or an interesting voice or a listenable voice or whatever it is they say. There's something about your voice quality that people gravitate towards, and you hear things from people. But you learn that it's not about your voice. I mean, it's very helpful to have a voice that people find listenable. But there's so much more to it than that. And you realize that just having a great voice is not going to land you work. There's a lot that goes into just learning how to read a script on mic and sound natural. And having a good voice will only take you so far.
What are some of the other things? Reading a script to sound natural, and I'm sure having perseverance and being able to market yourself. And there's probably things that have nothing to do with the voice. But...
Yes, hustle is definitely important. Training is important. Willingness to make investments. This wasn't cheap to do. You had to invest money over time. And you got to watch that money, because if you're not making enough in your business to be profitable, then something's wrong, right? It's not good business. So I started off with a more affordable mic than the one that you see here, because that's what I could afford. And then when you start booking things that will help you pay for new equipment, new demos, new acoustic treatment, more training, you just got to keep investing in yourself, because if you're not, you'll stagnate.
Are you still training? Do you still have people who kind of coach you? And
Yep, I still do training. Mm-hmm. I mean, I just recently released a bunch of new demos. So there's training that goes into preparing yourself for that demo, and then there's the work of recording the demo itself. So recently, a lot of my training has been preparing to record those demos. But, I'll do training just on auditioning technique and things like that, or training in a new area of voiceover that I haven't tried.
Can you give us some examples of that? Would that be different types of characters or different types of range for your voice?
I did 2 character demos this year, and I hadn't done any character demos before. I'd done some character work, either in audiobooks or auditions that I'd landed, a couple of video games, a couple of animation things here and there, but not a lot of it. And I didn't have really any demos that I could use to show your skills in that area, and I'd kind of put it off, because I thought to myself, it's really competitive, and there's lots of people that are really good at that. And I think I'm just going to stay in the Malone zone. I'm just going to stay, you know what I'm saying?
It's a nice place to be.
Well, sure. It's fine. But you know what I'm saying is that, when you get good feedback on your commercial reads, you're getting good feedback on your e-learning, on your corporate reads, maybe you just want to stay there because it's comfortable and it's closer to you. And it's less of a risk. But I just finally decided, really during the pandemic, that I've been putting this off for long enough. I came to Los Angeles to be an actor, and I want to stretch. And this stuff's fun. I've loved this since I was a kid. Why don't I try it? So I started working with a coach to get better at character reads.
Could you give any little bits of them right now?
Well, one of them is a character that I've been working on for a long time. He's got sort of a speech impediment, so it's, it sounds a little bit like that. And he's sort of the man-child inside of me that I like to use, for that kind of thing. Right, so I had just been...
I had to hold my laughter so I didn't interrupt you. And I get to see you on video, but obviously the listeners can't. I thought it was interesting. You were holding your hand sort of near your neck and hunching your shoulders up a little. So it was definitely a whole body experience when you were creating that guy.
Right. And that's not the best. Hunching is not the best way to create resonance, but it is a good way to create.
Right. A little character.
Right. physicality, it really is very important. So thinking
Yeah.
about your character's physicality, if you're voicing someone who's rotund, you want to be thinking about being in that body. Or if you're voicing someone older than you or younger than you, you just want to think about what's it like being in that body.
Speaking of voicing characters, I also got to talk with the incredible lyricist Glenn Slater for 2 episodes in Season 1, episodes 4 and 5. He's written the lyrics for Broadway shows, movies, and TV shows, and has won a Grammy, an Emmy, and been nominated for 3 Tony Awards. Glenn often works with the composer Alan Menken, as they did on the animated hit movie Tangled. Glenn told me how some of those songs came together.
I'm going to go back to Tangled. The most famous scene in the movie is what we call the lantern scene. Rapunzel and Flynn Rider are sitting in a rowboat, and there's all these sort of Chinese lanterns that are floating. It's this beautiful image. But when we got the assignment, all we had was the 2 of them in a rowboat, and it's this kind of awkward moment, and that's where we were told the ballad was going to go. And so we were like, okay, well, that seems like it's a big love song kind of a thing. And so we went back to our studios, and we wrote this big Broadway belting ballad, like a big, whole new world kind of a feeling thing. And it was pretty good. And we brought it to our partners at Disney, to the directors and to the writer, and we played it for them and got the exact opposite reaction that we wanted. Instead of the, oh my God, this is amazing, we got the, well, it's like, okay, what's wrong? And they said, well, it wasn't what we were hoping for this scene. And we said, well, what did you want? And they said, well, we wanted something that was a little less show-tuney. So Alan being Alan said, all right, let's get a piano, let's all sit down in front of the piano and let's work this out.
Right then and there?
Right
Let's
then
just
and
sit down. Oh, great.
So Alan sits down at the piano and he says, what about this? This is less show-tuney. And he wrote it and they were like, that's a little more poppy, but that's not what we had in mind. And I'm meanwhile saying, oh my God, that's an amazing melody. Like that could be an Academy Award winning song. Are you crazy? No, it's not what we had in mind. So Alan said, what about this? And he writes another melody that had a little bit more, I don't know, it was a little more folky. It's like, oh my God, that's an amazing melody. And said, no, it's not this enough. It's not that enough. This went on for literally 3 hours. He must have written 20 different, maybe 30 different melodies, each one of which could have been a hit song, each one of which didn't work for them. Until finally we said, we're not getting what it is that you're looking for. And they said, well, can we show you the visuals that we're going to be showing, like while they're in the rowboat? And it was the first time they got us out these big, like, paintings that an artist had done of the lanterns. And it was like, oh, you're worried that the song is going to upstage the visual. They were like, yes, we want this all to be about those lanterns. We want it to be about that majestic moment, and we don't want it to be about Alan's big ballad. So we said, okay. So once we understood what the issue was...
They hadn't been able to verbalize that to you, but you finally got it by seeing the storyboards.
Yeah, whether or not they didn't want to insult Alan by saying, we don't want you to upstage our song, which is what I think it was. But when we eventually got it, we were like, oh, okay. And so Alan wrote a melody that was very tranquil. It didn't build, it's not histrionic, it doesn't feel dramatic, it just sort of sits in a place. And when I heard that music, I was like, all right, emotionally, what am I getting out of this tranquil piece of music? What I'm getting is these 2 characters who have been talking at each other a mile a minute. I mean, they're like a screwball comedy couple.
Throughout the movie.
It's insults and banter and one-upping each other until this moment where they're sitting in the rowboat and these lanterns come up. And for the first time, they're both quiet. And it was like, okay, that makes sense to me. It's the first time that they can stop and look at the other person and think. And this is not a ballad that they sing to each other. This is a ballad that's inside their heads. And once I got that, I was able to piece together what the lyric needed to be. Literally, I mean, they needed the song the next day. So when we left the office, it was 4 o'clock. And at 9 the next morning, we handed them a finished demo.
Wow, that's impressive. I love those behind-the-scenes stories. I got more about working in TV. Ken Fuchs is an Emmy Award-winning television director. In Season 2, Episode 23, he took us way backstage on the sets of Family Feud, Shark Tank, and the Bachelor/Bachelorette franchise, which he's worked on for 20 years. I think one thing you and I might have in common is both our dads were professors. Is that right?
Yes.
Yes. So what, if any, feedback did you get about wanting to get into a creative field? Was that encouraged?
Oh, God. Oh, no. Academics? No. TV? No. Nobody watches TV. But, I have to say I was the 4th of 4 children, so I think they understood the value of like supporting me and letting me explore different things. And it sort of went pretty well right from the beginning. I mean, I just stayed in production my whole life, and I always had work and paid my bills. So I think they figured overall. And then getting into the DGA and joining the Directors Guild and starting to assistant direct and then direct, that was like a big step in terms of like my
Legitimacy.
career. Yeah, just like, well, it's funny. My dad was like in the checkout line at the supermarket one day, and I must have been like 40. Well, let's see, 40. I was older, and the cover was like The Bachelor all over it or something. And he was like thumbing through it. And after he called me, he goes, I guess you're doing okay. And I'm like, yeah, Dad, I'm doing okay. It's been 20 years, a wife and 3 kids, and all good. And he goes, okay, just checking. I see your show. One of your programs here is mentioned in this magazine. So I guess people are watching. Yeah.
People are watching. He wasn't watching, but at least people were watching.
He's not watching.
Has he watched?
He watches Shark Tank.
Okay.
And he watches a little Feud. And he does not watch a lot of Bachelor, although he'll watch, and then he'll call me the next day and give me the rundown of everything the Bachelor should be wearing and said wrong. And people can't help themselves, right?
Everyone's a critic.
Oh, my God. And then he criticizes Mark Cuban and Kevin O'Leary. He should be thinking about it in these terms. He gets very academic about it. So it's really fun. It's fun now. But it's a tough support thing. It's really, really, and I tell people getting into it, like, be ready, because not all your friends are going to understand. Like, you'll lose friends along the way, and your family really won't understand, because you won't be able to go to someone's birthday party, and you're going to miss a family vacation, because it's freelance. We're all freelance. We're all day to day, and we're all scrambling and hustling for work, and that never stops. And your support system has to understand that. You don't make plans. Are you available for dinner? I don't know. I'm shooting. So the answer is always no. And for some reason you get out early, maybe you can join some friends, but it's a really, really, really difficult business, but really, really rewarding. And it attracts a certain kind of person, but not for everybody. My sons are going into it. My sons are all in production, and it's like scary. It's like, don't you want a real job? But I'd be the last person to discourage them from pursuing it, because it's an amazing life. Hopefully you have your loved ones support you and encourage you.
Your career has been exemplary, a real touchstone for them.
Pure luck.
To get to look up to.
But really just luck, because I've worked on brilliant shows that lasted one season. So there's no like rhyme or reason, or how I even got involved with Bachelor is like a weird little, I was like on the sideline of a kid's soccer game. I was like watching my like 8-year-old play soccer, and there was another dad there watching his kid, and we started talking, and that sort of led to my involvement in The Bachelor. So my advice is go to your kids' soccer games, say hi to everyone, and just weird, right? It's so random.
Yeah.
Just there's so much.
Right place, right time.
Yes, all timing and luck, and who and when you meet, just crazy.
The longevity, maybe you feel like it's luck to have, met the person at the soccer game and stuff, but you wouldn't have lasted with that franchise 20 years because of luck. That was because of how you treat people and your work ethic and your skill set and on and on. So there might be some luck, but there's a lot of other elements that are you.
Okay, if you say so.
I say so, and you need to accept it.
Okay, I accept it.
The shows that you work on are really cultural icons, People love these shows.
It's very unusual. It's very cool. Well, I must say it's not very glamorous. It's not all glamorous. It's just a lot of hard work, and people think it's like Hollywood is some kind of giant party and glamorous, like walk the red carpet. And most of the time it's just a job, and you're kind of like doing the job. And then there's moments that are just incredible that you could never have anywhere else. But most of the time it's kind of like a lot of meetings and planning and,
I think the core of it, though, like you said earlier, you're a storyteller. And that's what's so cool. In the end, the meetings and the sitting in the truck and all of that, what you're doing in the end, it's all adding up to is a creative mode of storytelling. And that's just fun,
Yeah.
you know?
That's right. We're always servicing the end goal and the sort of clarity and being concise and sort of drilling down on what that is and understanding the viewers, I guess, to some degree. But it is fun and it's rewarding and it's the people. It's an unusual band of misfits. And I think for people who don't have that, it's sort of like, wow, that's kind of cool.
You made it happen. I think that's really admirable.
Well,
I love people that follow their passion.
but it was the only place I fit in. I mean, really, Elizabeth, like in high school, like I was like kind of a misfit. Like I didn't really have a group exactly. I didn't really know where to fit in. I wasn't sure what I was good at. And then my first day on my first show, I knew one day I knew I was done. This was it. These are my people.
Wow.
And I think that's sort of the hard thing to find sometimes is your people.
But you didn't know then that it was going to be directing, right?
No.
It was a bit of a circuitous path.
Yeah. And
to
that's
get
always,
there.
and that's
Yeah.
okay.
You just knew that it was production.
Yes, I knew I was joining the circus, and we really are. We're like carnies, you know, we like go from town to town. We put up our tent, we do the show. And I knew that was for me.
Entertainment these days doesn't just mean theater, movies, and television. Obviously, lots of people are glued to their phones watching TikTok and Instagram every day. I chatted with one social media star, Linda Fruits, in Season 2, Episode 21. Her Fruits of Motherhood channels have hundreds of thousands of followers. If someone wanted to kind of try to follow in your footsteps, which of course they can't fully, because I'm sure part of the reason you're successful is because it's your unique voice, right? You're being yourself, you're being your authentic self. But what are some tips that you would say? Is it to just express your most authentic self, or what else? Be creative.
Absolutely. So like I have a couple friends that have like started accounts and stuff, and I've obviously encouraged them to. I try to remind them that what makes them unique is what they need to focus on. Your experiences, your unique experiences. And I always say before I post something, if I'm kind of nervous to post it, I definitely should be sharing that, because that means either I'm hesitant because it's bold or hesitant because it's really vulnerable. I really push people to say the things that they probably don't want to say publicly, because that's what's going to inspire other people to relate, because it's a deep secret or a deep emotion that maybe we don't share a lot of.
Wow. That's really brave of you. You know? No, I think a lot of people are much more private. That I think that is part of the reason that people respond to you, because people respond to people's true selves, and you're not putting up a front. You are being open and you're showing your real self. Like you were saying initially when you had a baby, and if people are just showing like, oh, all the perfect things,
Yeah, I was
that
like,
just makes people feel less than, right?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. And so I really have this like feeling deep in my gut that women are taught to hide the things that they struggle with, because it keeps other women out of the light as well. So like I try to say all the things so that way it could potentially help someone else, whether it's just like a Me Too moment, or if it's like literal, like help with the things that I struggle a lot with, like feeding my children. I talk about how picky my toddler is all the time. And every time I post something like that, I see all these moms and they reply and they're like, oh my God, me too. You make me feel less bad about what I feed my children, you know? And it's like, we put all these like pressure points on ourselves for no reason. And so like, that's what I try to just give someone a hug, right? Like,
Yeah.
an emotional hug, like a Me Too hug.
I noticed you wrote about breastfeeding and formula. And when I had my kids, I don't even know where this came from, but I was so determined that I needed to only breastfeed them.
Yeah.
And that was just something I put on myself. Nobody was, my husband, my mom, no one was saying like, you can't give them formula, but I was just determined.
I know.
And I did that. And afterwards I was like, why did I do that? Like I made myself so miserable. I was so exhausted. And I thought, why didn't I bend a little bit for my own sanity?
I know.
You know, and so I feel like
it's not like yelling at you, breast only, you know, that's who you're feeding.
like you were saying, there's just these rules that we put upon ourselves, whether it's about like exercise or food or our kids or these things. Sometimes you need to give ourselves a break and say, lighten up on the rules.
Yeah. And I think genuinely, it comes from a place of love, right? Like we love our little kids and we want to do what's best for them. And then we create this like rules before we had kids, what we were going to look like as parents. And that's where we get stuck when we realize that we're not that person, or the expectations of what we were going to be like changes. And sometimes that's hard to accept. And so we either keep trying real hard or we're like, this is the new me.
One of your posts I wrote down because I just thought it was so beautiful. I mean, so many of them really resonate, but this one says, things we used to think mattered. 1, clean house. 2, perfect appearance. 3, raising the smartest children. Things that actually matter. 1, mom's mental health comes first. 2, being true to yourself. 3, raising kind children. And I think that just really encapsulates what you were just saying. You know, we can have this image of what we think everything has to be, but if you're going to stick to those really strict rules, you're going to sacrifice so much else of what is really pure and true about life.
Before I would go for a walk around the block in my neighborhood when I had the one child, I would put concealer under my eyes because I didn't want anyone to know how tired I was. And I thought that that made me a bad mom. And it's so silly. I didn't see anybody on my walk around the block, right? And I probably had sunglasses on because it was bright. I live in Florida. It's hot and bright and sunny. But that's just like one of those things that I always go back to. And I'm like, my idea of struggling as a parent means I'm doing a bad job. And I think we all still struggle with that. I mean, I do sometimes still. And so I really try to remind moms like to take care of themselves because I needed that. I needed someone to tell me that when I was a new mom. I feel like I used to have anxiety. I don't really have it much anymore, but I think I'm very much an overthinker. I really like to process my emotions a lot. I like being alone and thinking and writing. And so I think that kind of comes with the territory of like self-analyzing all the time, especially with my Instagram account. Every day I think about like, what am I struggling with? What is bothering me? What does that really mean? All the time digging into myself. And I think it's kind of created me up until this point of just sharing that out loud.
Near and dear to my heart was getting to interview Dan Sturman, an Oscar and Emmy Award-winning documentary filmmaker, in Season 2, Episode 15. What do you consider the most challenging or frustrating part of your job, and what is the most rewarding?
Well, I mean, certainly, without a doubt, the most challenging thing is just getting the funding to make films. Nowadays, you absolutely can make a film with an iPhone and a laptop. Doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be a good film. And the challenge ultimately is coming up with a really compelling story or a compelling subject that you can tell that story in a really compelling way. But regardless, it's just the competition to get funding, to convince people that what you're doing has worth. It's like a salesperson with any product. You're trying to convince somebody to back you because there's value in what you're trying to create. And before you've created it, can they envision the potential and realize that you're worth supporting? So that's definitely the most frustrating and challenging thing. And it's a big part of the work is just trying to raise money. I think the most satisfying thing is it's just the creative process. Well, actually, I would say certainly the great thing about certainly the films that I've made over the years, you're constantly becoming mini expert in whatever it is that you're learning about. And I find that really satisfying. I love history. I'm constantly reading nonfiction. So the opportunity to do these deep dives into aspects of our culture or other people's cultures, really satisfying. Beyond that, it's being able to meet people who are inspiring and who've led these extraordinary lives and being inspired by them. John Lewis is an extraordinary human being. And absolutely, he's one of the most remarkable human beings of the 20th century, as far as I'm concerned. And being around him and meeting him and listening to him is really a thrilling experience. Get to meet people and go places that you wouldn't necessarily ordinarily ever find yourself in. And by the way, I talked about John Lewis. It's like everybody knows John Lewis, but there were 20 other people that I interviewed for that film who are inspiring in their own ways. So absolutely, the opportunity to meet people and go places is extraordinary. The opportunity to then sort of shape a story in a way that ultimately resonates with people is really, really gratifying for sure.
And then you've created something that lasts. It's out there forever. You've left films that people can watch in 2 years, 5 years, 50 years, you're creating a legacy of work. That's really cool.
I used to think that. Now I'm just like, oh my God, there's like, what is it? It's like 100 hours of video being uploaded to YouTube every second. And I think that's like I mean, there's just so much out there. I mean, clearly, absolutely.
Quality. We're talking about quality work, though.
There you go. Exactly. For sure.
Definitely quality work when Dan is involved. If you want to hear more of any of these conversations, you can find the full episodes on our website, theexperiencepodcast.net. Season 3 is coming out on May 11th. We have loads more interesting, intriguing guests sharing their experiences in the new season. So please tell a few friends about this podcast. I'm Elizabeth Pearson Garr. Thank you for joining The Experience.